response video, I guess. Yeah, might as well. Rose Bushy guy. Testing this camera, so I don't know about this volume, but anyway, so he's doing this pronatalist argument, and in his usual obnoxious, arrogant manner.
And this is how the argument goes. We all know that pleasure is a positive thing. We all...
Yeah, okay. Well, see, right there, you're gonna blow it, okay? Because positive is relative to what, right? I mean, positive, absolutely positive, like guaranteed money in the bank kind of positive, like it can pay for anything, like it's super money. Value is always got to be commoditized. It's always got to be attached to something. And so where you could argue that it's positive, you know, to be not have a broken leg, right? Doesn't mean that that's a positive condition to be in. It just means that it's better than a negative condition. You get me? So yeah, without that premise, without that clarification of the value terminology, yeah, you really can't just say it's positive and everybody knows it. No, not good enough.
Enjoy pleasure. Pleasure is experienced by any organism. It's the definition of pleasure that it is pleasurable.
Well, gee, that's brilliant. Yeah, again, but we know how it's manifest, right? That through our psychology and evolution, that there's a commensurate hunger that's usually attached to these pleasures. There's very few pleasures you could talk about without it being quite obvious what the connected hunger or desire or addiction or attachment that had to exist previous to the deriving of the pleasure. So in fact you did need the deprivation. And there seems to be also obvious associations between the extent of the deprivation. How hard the deprivation is usually has something to do with how good it feels to get relieved of it. You know, the bigger the pimple, the, you know, I mean, it's just releasing tensions and negative states of being created to make it attractive to acquire a thing and derive this thing called pleasure.
Now, if pleasure is a good thing, then we can objectively state, without any equivocation or any sort of...
Yeah, without any sort of logic or rationality. So just be, you know, you're just being such an asshole here. You know it's got to be more complicated than that. What the basics to it is just that simple. Oh yeah, pleasure's worth $1 trillion, and all pain is just a stub toe. I mean, that's all you're trying to do here.
No ifs and buts or maybes. That no pleasure is, by definition, worse than pleasure. No.
Now, again, so you really think that's how we function. So that it's better to need something than to not need something. It's better to be vulnerable to, like even a heroin addict. You're going to say it's better to be a heroin addict than to not be a heroin addict? I mean, there's nothing logical to that. These are psychological mechanisms built into us through a evolutionary process that's obviously got to be accounted for, and you're just running from that accounting. That it is in fact a negative state of being that makes the acquisition of the other state appear positive. We're always put in a negative state of being. That's the generic state of being. That's why the mediocrity feels like mediocrity.
Let's look at life then. We can observe that if there is life, then there is the possibility of attaining pleasure. As long as there is life, there is a possibility of attaining pleasure. Whereas, of course...
Yeah, so this is just too simple, right? Again, this is life is not made out of just attaining pleasure, and pleasure itself is a tiny fraction of the life experience. Most of the life experience is in the pursuit of pleasurable experiences, and that pursuit is built on this mechanism of creating a deprivated state. Hungers, needs.
Where there is no life, there cannot possibly be any pleasure. So,
well, this is another argument where, theoretically it could be argued that life is a zero-sum game, and that in fact the non-existent are in nirvana. Okay, they are a not burdened state, and there's every possibility that being conscious just means that you are now aware of the you are now capable of being deprivated. You're capable of being put in a state where you can perceive a better state of being, where something can appear to be a better place to be, a better state, a better quality of existence. And that the very possibility of that is because you are in a negative state, because you are in fact been put in a dungeon of sorts, a psychological dungeon. And of course it's pleasurable to gain relief from your fetters. Let's use that word. To gain relief from your fetters appears to be a positive, but you're not achieving a positive, you're eliminating a negative.
In other words, if we are preventing life, we are preventing the possibility of pleasure.
So again, you still haven't even talked once yet about the concept of suffering and pain. Is that going to come in here somewhere? Because even if I was to concede that there was something actually called pleasure that was made out of something other than previous deprivation, if there was such a pleasure that was an absolute positive, not a relative positive, even if I conceded its existence, you'd still have to explain that that pleasure was so good that it would be adequate payment for all the monstrosities of life, all the horror stories that are the payment for whatever that pleasure is worth.
And replacing it with a certainty of no pleasure whatsoever. As a result, we must conclude that the absence of life is by necessity and logically worse than the presence of life. And
yeah, so this is it. This is all. You're actually going to make an argument where you're going to talk about sentient life and not mention suffering, and say that you've somehow said something relevant and meaningful and the least bit intelligent. Yeah, sorry.
The concluding argument, the concluding pro-natalist position must therefore be that we must ensure that not only does life persist and continue to exist.
Yeah, well, whatever. Like I said, if it was all free, if it was all just free lunch, then this point might actually mean something. But then I'd still say, for what, you silly person? How much? What's the amount? Do we turn every molecule in space into a sentient so it can eat a Big Mac? I mean, there's a point where it just all becomes kind of preposterous, doesn't it? And I guess that point is the fact that even without... Alright, bummers. Yeah, I gotta continue with a different camera. Yeah, battery went out. Just didn't recharge the battery. I thought it was okay, but it wasn't. So anyway, so wherever I was, yeah. So he's making an argument validating the existence of the DNA gladiator wars. The 4 billion year long DNA gladiator war, based on the premise that there was no price paid for it. And that, quite obviously, since there was no price paid for it, would be better to have this than not to have this, because there were pink balloons. And pink balloons are so cool that, yes, it was worth 4 billion years of non-suffering for the pink balloon. Whatever. Yeah, this is what is called intelligent conversation. I don't think so.
But that it proliferates and spreads as far and wide as possible in this universe. And that, in a nutshell, is the pronatalist position. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't even think pronatalists would be as... I don't think they would. I just don't think they'd be very proud to take on a position that ignored the most glaring, obvious thing about life there is, which is the fact that it does open its door to this thing called harm and suffering, and for you not to even apply this simple concept, to even acknowledge its existence, and to say that you've made an argument for anything when you ignore something so fundamental. I mean, it's like talking about cars and not talking about engines. I mean, it just really can't be done. Yeah, I mean, realistically, it's a toy conversation. It's not a real conversation. So bravo, Putz. Brilliant once again, to demonstrating that no truth is, has too much integrity for you to convert it into a piece of toilet paper. Fodder for your advertisings, which were on your video now, I noticed too. Yeah, that's really petty also. So bravo, asshole. Just a brilliant piece of absolute crap for a video. Waste of my time, that's for sure. Alright.